Okay, so this is Horrid Henry's Nits. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Dad scratched his head. "Stop scratching, please," said Mum. "We're eating dinner." Mum scratched her head. "Stop scratching, please," said Dad. "We're eating dinner." Henry scratched his head. "Stop scratching, Henry," said Mum and Dad. "Uh-oh," said Mum. She put down her fork and frowned at Henry. "Henry, do you have nits again?" "Of course not," said Henry. "Come over to the sink," Henry said Mum. "Why?" said Henry. "I need to check your head." Henry dragged his feet over to her as slowly as possible. "It's not fair," he thought. It wasn't his fault Nits loved him. Henry's head was a gathering place for nits far and wide. They probably held nit parties there, and foreign nits visited him on their holidays. Mum dragged the nit comb across Henry's head. She made a face and groaned. "Oh no, you're crawling with nits, Henry," said Mum. "Oh, let's see," said Henry. He always liked counting how many nits he had. 1, 2, 3, 45, 46, 47. He counted, dropping them onto a paper towel. "It's not polite to count nits," said his younger brother, Perfect Peter, wiping his mouth with his spotless napkin. "Is it, Mum?" "It certainly isn't," said Mum. Chapter 2. Dad dragged the nit comb across his head and made a face. "Ugh," said Dad. Mum dragged the comb through her hair. "Ugh," said Mum. Mum combed Perfect Peter's hair. Then she did it again, and again, and again. "No nits, Peter," said Mum, smiling. "As usual, well done, darling." Perfect Peter smiled modestly. "It's because I wash and comb my hair every night," said Peter. Henry scowled. True, his hair was filthy, but then, "Nits love clean hair," said Henry. "No, they don't," said Peter. "I've never ever had nits." "We'll see about that," thought Henry. When no one was looking, he picked a few nits off the paper towel, then he wandered over to Peter and casually fingered a lock of his hair. Leap! Scratch, scratch. "Mum!" squealed Peter. "Henry's pulling my hair!" "Stop it, Henry," said Dad. "I wasn't pulling his hair," said Henry indignantly. "I just wanted to see how clean it was, and it is so lovely and clean," added Henry sweetly. "I wish my hair was as clean as Peter's." Peter beamed. It wasn't often that Henry said anything nice to him. "Right," said Mum grimly. "Everyone upstairs, it's shampoo time." Chapter 3. "No!" shrieked Horrid Henry. "No shampoo!" He hated the stinky, smelly, horrible shampoo much more than he hated having nits. Only today his teacher, Miss Battleaxe, had sent him home a nit letter. "Beware! Nits, 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 nits. Nits have been seen in school. Get rid of them. Wash your hair with supersonic nit blasting shampoo, please, or else." Naturally, Henry had crumpled the letter and thrown it away. He was never ever going to have pongy nit shampoo on his head again. What rotten luck Mum had spotted him scratching. "It's the only way to get rid of nits," said Dad. "But it never works," screamed Henry, and he ran for the door. Mum and Dad grabbed him, then they dragged him, kicking and screaming, to the bathroom. "Nits are living creatures," howled Henry. "Why kill them?" "Because," said Mum. Because they're blood-sucking nits," said Dad. "Blood-sucking?" Henry had never thought of that. In the split second that he stood still to consider this interesting information, Mum emptied the bottle of supersonic nip-blasting shampoo over his hair. "No!" screamed Henry. Frantically, he shook his head. There was shampoo on the door, there was shampoo on the floor, there was shampoo all over Mum and Dad. The only place there was no shampoo was on Henry's head. "Henry, stop being horrid!" yelled Dad, wiping shampoo off his jacket. "What a big fuss over nothing," said Peter. Henry lunged at him. Mum seized Henry by the collar and held him back. "Now, Peter," said Mum, "that wasn't a kind thing to say to Henry, was it? Not everyone is as brave as you." "Oh, you're right, Mum," said perfect Peter. "I was being rude and thoughtless. It won't happen again. I'm so sorry, Henry." Mum smiled at him. "That was a perfect apology, Peter. As for you, Henry," she sighed, "we'll get more shampoo tomorrow." "Phew," thought Henry, giving his head an extra good scratch. "Safe for one more day." Chapter 4. The next morning at school, a group of parents burst into the classroom, waving the knit letter and shouting. "My Margaret doesn't have knits. She never has and she never will. How dare you send home such a letter?" shrieked Moody Margaret's mother. "The idea! My Josh doesn't have knits," shouted his mother. "My Toby doesn't have knits. Some nasty child in this class isn't bug-busting," shouted his father. Miss Battleaxe squared her shoulders. "Rest assured that the culprit will be found," she said. "I have declared war on knits." Scratch, scratch, scratch. Miss Battleaxe spun round. Her beady eyes swivelled over the class. "Who's scratching?" she demanded. There was silence. Henry bent over his worksheet and tried to look studious. "Henry is," said Moody Margaret. "Liar!" shouted Horrid Henry. "It was William." Weepy William burst into tears. "No, it wasn't," he sobbed. Miss Battleaxe glared at the class. "I'm going to find out once and for all who's got knits," she growled. "I don't. I don't. I don't." "Silence!" ordered Miss Battleaxe. "Nora, the knit nurse, is coming this morning." "Who's got knits? Who's not bug-busting? We'll all find out soon." "Uh-oh," thought Henry. "Now I'm sunk." There was no escaping Knitty Nora, Bug Explorer, and her ferocious combs. Everyone would know he had the knits. Rude Ralph would never stop teasing him. He'd be shampooed every night. Mum and Dad would find out about all the knit letters he'd thrown away. He could, of course, get a tummy ache double quick and be sent home. But Knitty Nora had a horrible way of remembering whose head she hadn't checked and then combing it in front of the whole class. He could run screaming out the door saying he'd caught mad cow disease, but somehow he didn't think Miss Battleaxe would believe him. There was no way out. This time he was well and truly stuck. Unless, suddenly, Henry had a wonderful, spectacular idea. It was so wicked and so horrible that even Horrid Henry hesitated. But only for a moment. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Chapter 5. Henry leaned over Clever Claire and brushed his hair lightly against hers. Leap, scratch, scratch, scratch. "Get away from me, Henry," hissed Claire. "I was just admiring your lovely picture," said Henry. He got up to sharpen his pencil. On his way to the sharpener, he brushed against Greedy Graham. Leap, scratch, scratch. On his way back from the sharpener, Henry stumbled and fell against anxious Andrew. Leap, scratch, scratch. Ow! Yelped Andrew. Oh, sorry, Andrew, said Henry. What big clumsy feet I have. Oops, he added, tripping over the carpet and banging heads with Weepy William. Leap, scratch, scratch. Ah! Wailed William. Sit down at once, Henry, said Miss Battleaxe. William, stop scratching. Bert, how do you spell cat? I don't know, said Beefy Bert. Horrid Henry leaned across the table and put his head close to Bert's. Cat, he whispered helpfully. Leap, scratch, scratch. Then Horrid Henry raised his hand. Yes, said Miss Battleaxe. I don't understand these instructions, said Henry sweetly. Could you please help me? Miss Battleaxe frowned. She liked to keep as far away from Henry as possible. Reluctantly, she came closer and bent over his work. Henry leaned his head near hers. Leap, scratch, scratch. Chapter 6. There was a pounding at the door. Then Nitty Nora marched into the classroom, bristling with combs and other instruments of torture. Line up, everyone, said Miss Battleaxe, patting her hair. The knit nurse is here. Rats, thought Henry. He'd hardly started. Slowly he stood up. Everyone pushed and shoved to be at first in the line. Then a few children remembered what they were lining up for and stampeded towards the back. Horrid Henry saw his chance and took it. He charged through the squabbling children, brushing against everyone as fast as he could. Leap, leap, scratch, 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 leap, scratch, scratch. Henry! Shouted Mrs. Battleaxe. Stay at playtime. Now go to the end of the queue. The rest of you, stop this nonsense at once. Moody Margaret had fought longest and hardest to be first. Proudly she presented her head to Nitty Nora. I certainly don't have knits, she said. Nitty Nora stuck the comb in. Knits! She announced, stuffing a knit note into Margaret's hand. For once, Margaret was too shocked to speak. But, she gasped. Hee, thought Henry. Now he wouldn't be the only one. Next, said Nitty Nora. She stuck the comb in Rude Rouse's greasy hair. Knits, she announced. Knit face, hissed Horrid Henry, beside himself with glee. Knits, said Nitty Nora, poking her comb into Lazy Linda's mop. Knits, said Nitty Nora, prodding Greedy Graham's fizzy hair. Knits, 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 she continued, pointing at Weepy William, Clever Claire, Sour Susan, Beefy Bert and Dizzy Dave. Then Nitty Nora beckoned to Miss Battleaxe. Teachers too, she ordered. Miss Battleaxe's jaw dropped. I have been teaching for 25 years and I have never had knits, she said. Don't waste your time. Check in me. Nitty Nora ignored her protest and stuck in the comb. She said, and whispered in Miss Battleaxe's ear. No! Howled Miss Battleaxe. No! Then she joined the line of weeping, wailing children, clutching their knit notes. At last it was Henry's turn. Nitty Nora stuck her comb into Henry's tangled hair and dragged it across his scalp. She combed again, and again, and again. No knits, said Nitty Nora. Keep up the good work, young man. I sure will, said Henry. Horrid Henry skipped home, waving his certificate. Look, Peter, crowed Henry, I knit free. Perfect Peter burst into tears. I'm not, he wailed.
Oh, he's got knits.
Hard luck, said Horrid Henry.